So let's start with a few definitions. This will help ensure that we're all on the same page with what some of the terms I'll use mean. And I know that sometimes in the world of branding there's a lot of confusion about brand, especially since its origin is really out of the retail. And more people are recognizing that brand has value for all kinds of organizations, products, places, and so forth. So starting with the word logo, a logo can be a symbol, it can be a typographical treatment, or it could be a combination of the two that represent an organization, product, or place. And it's important to know that a logo is not a brand. It takes a lot more than a logo to make a brand. And what a brand really is the collective look that represents the organization and its culture. So here are a few examples of logos for places. Obviously, there's no one way to develop a logo, but what I'll be able to share with you today are some tips on making sure that your logo can be successful. So some of those components for a successful logo are first of all, embedding meaning. Is there a story about your mark? Does it have a connection to your place or the history of that place? And that connection can be abstract. It doesn't have to be a literal translation of an architectural element or a historical figure. But it's nice if it has a little bit of a backstory to it, something that helps people emotionally connect. One thing I've learned in 15 years of designing logos is that people are very emotionally connected to logos. And that can really work for us in creating identities that help people build strong memories and strong passions for the places that they love. Second, you'll want to make sure that your mark is simple and it's clean and clear. And I'll show you a logo coming up in a few pages that isn't quite successful because it's a little bit too complex, which makes it hard to read, especially at smaller sizes. But really, you want as few elements as possible. Keeping your logo simple can make the mark stronger, especially when you're using it and it's competing with a lot of other logos or elements on a page. And readable. One of the things that I see quite frequently is that if there's a symbol and a type combined, sometimes the type is too small relative to the symbol, and as the logo gets reduced in size, the type becomes really, really hard to read. So making sure that it's well proportioned and that there's not too many elements so that there's, again, that clarity. And of course, we want to consider that flexibility, making sure it can be read small, and also work in large scale. How will this translate to signage? That's one of the things that we often see misconsidered or ill-considered is that logos, not all logos translate well to signage. So if that's going to be an important component, an important representation of your brand, gateway signage or wayfinding signage in your community, it's important to consider that early on. And there we go, we're reproducible. Think about all of those mediums, signage, web, print, the small stuff, the big stuff, the black and white stuff. You know, think about all of its applications and consider how successful it will be in each of those. One thing just to know about logos is that, you know, I mentioned they're emotional for people. People get very connected and passionate about logo marks. And one thing to not expect is that you'll gain consensus right out of the gates. Certainly you want to involve a lot of voices, and I'll talk about that later in the presentation, but don't think that you're going to be able to get a group of people together in a room to design a logo. Not everybody is going to 100% agree, and just as nobody cares what color your conference room is until you ask them, then once you ask them, they have a really strong opinion. You don't want a lot of people, you know, putting in their 2 cents when you're going through this kind of creative process. And many of you may have heard the saying before, what is a camel but a horse designed by committee? And I've seen a lot of camel logos, so we're going to really try to avoid that in the process. So to continue with the definitions, let's talk a moment about brand. And brand is that symbolic embodiment of all of the information connected to your product, organization, or place. So this is really a part of your larger branding strategy. How is it you're going to communicate about your place? What are the tangibles, the look, the message, the information? What are the tangibles about the place itself? You know, what are some of your assets? So in designing your brand, you want to understand deeply who you are as a community, what you represent, what you stand for. But you also want to know your audience. Marketing 101 is know your audience. So are you aiming to attract potential visitors? Are you looking to attract new residents, business owners? In a case of a college town, you might even be looking to attract students. So thinking about your audience and how your messages might have to flex depending on who your primary, secondary, and tertiary audiences might be. What's important in talking about messages is that there's a connection, that you understand kind of the priorities of what you're trying to communicate, even if you have to change the language a little bit for each audience type. Additionally, in thinking about your place, what is it you do want to communicate? What do you want people to know about you? What do you want them to remember? And that's where, you know, if you can sum up all of the messages that you're trying to communicate, that's where one of the best tools come in, one of my favorite tools, which is the tagline. And a tagline really sums up in just a few words who you are, what you offer, what you deliver, or what you stand for. Obviously, in a few words, you can't do all of these things, but creating a short tagline to you know, kind of embody the spirit, the energy of your particular community. So a couple of examples of taglines that I thought were successful. This one is for East 4th, and this was formerly this kind of scary alley full of wig shops in downtown Cleveland that really was underutilized. And the concept is that it rose like a phoenix from the ashes to become one of downtown Cleveland's hottest night spots. So there's restaurants, a comedy club, there's a House of Blue. So what truly happened was that East 4th became the soul of the city. Another tagline is for Woodland Park, Colorado. And this tagline is really fresh and youthful and talks about kind of this concept of high altitude fun. And a third example, this is for San Mateo, California, and this is after the community went through a process. We were not engaged in this process, but what really emerged is that San Mateo was known for food. And so the tagline, all the ingredients emerged, and it's a terrific tagline, a great, brief, fun few words that capture the spirit of the community. But this is kind of where I mentioned the camel logo. I'm a little confused on why there's a train in my food. Too many ideas packed into one small mark. So a few words for a successful tagline. Keep it short, generally 3 to 5 words. But you want it to be original and catchy. And some of the really good ones I've seen out there use a play on words. So they might take an existing catchphrase and alter it a little bit, or there's maybe alliterations that will work. And if I can recommend some reading, there's this book called Made to Stick, and it's by Chip Heath and Van Heath. And it's really a great discussion on the art of storytelling and why some ideas stick and some don't. And it talks a lot about connecting into people's minds, memories, and emotions, and those are the things that people remember. Memorable, needs to be original and catchy. You may have seen it before, but the most frequently used tagline in every community in America is work, live, play. Work, period, live, period, play, period. And there's nothing wrong with that. That certainly sums up the activities of any good community, but it's not original. So I wouldn't expect to use that and be able to differentiate your community from the neighboring community. So while there may be a place for that in your talking points, it's not unique enough to make for a good tagline. Authentic. It has to be you. It has to feel good. It has to feel right. It has to be something that most or all of the people in your community can really get on board with, and it just feels like what you're all about. And you can do that by engaging in a real good community engagement process, which I'll talk about momentarily. Connective. It makes sense, again, for who you are, what you offer. What do people do there? What are people like there? So really capturing that sense of place. Another tool in your toolbox in developing the tangible assets of a brand are palettes. And there's a number of different kinds of palettes that you can use in any combination to kind of start creating a real visual identity that's unique to you. And the most obvious palette to use is a color palette. So think about selecting 3 to 5 colors. Repetition is exactly what you want to build recognition. So don't use the whole color wheel. Consider leaving out a primary, maybe 2 primaries, and building a palette that's unique but captures the flavor of your downtown. So think about how color communicates about you. Do you want to feel trendy? Do you want to look conservative? Do you want something young and fresh? Or do you want something that is more representative of the historical nature of your downtown? Color really can communicate a lot in those types of recognitions that people have with different color palettes. Font palettes are also very powerful. Generally, we'd recommend selecting 1 or 2 fonts and use them over and over again. Sometimes it's nice to have a serif font combined with a sans serif font, so they'll always work pretty nicely together. Patterns are sometimes underestimated. There's real power in creating patterns, and it could be as simple as a particular striping pattern or as complex as a fleur-de-lis that repeats in the background of your website. But if it's something that you're using over and over again that again has some meaning and some connection to your downtown, that can start to build recognition again. When people see the pattern, they instantly think of you. Images. Photography always comes to mind, and there's definitely going to be a place for photography. And anticipate that you'll need to incorporate amateur snapshots within your marketing materials, within your website. But could you go a step further and think about a particular photo style that might be representative of just you, whether it's the close-ups of faces, or maybe it's people in motion, or it's really grand architectural shots, something that is embodies again who you are as a downtown. And illustrations are often underused. I seldom see illustrations used to represent communities, but it's a great way to differentiate yourself. And again, you don't have to use all of these palettes. They're just tools that are available to you as you build your visual brand. Messaging. In addition to your tagline, you might have 3 or 5 top things that you want to communicate. It's a nice idea to write those down and use them for reference, but you don't have to use the same language over and over again. The way we think of it is, these are not elevator speeches or elevator pitches. Those don't work very well because they sound very canned and pretend. What it is, what are the things that you're most proud of and you want to make sure people know and take away when you're talking about your downtown? And each and every person who becomes this advocate for your community should embody that and embrace that and internalize it and be able to say it back out in their own words. So it feels very natural, but by writing them down, you have kind of a reference point, so you know what it is you do want people to know about your downtown. Voice is that tone of delivery. So this is a style question. Do you want to be fun and casual? Would you rather keep the tone more professional or matter of fact? Do you want to appeal to a more sophisticated crowd? So it's that voice and the type of language you use can be a differentiator as well. And then, of course, you have headlines. So this would be more around the vein of a campaign series to market your downtown. So last definition, of course, is the biggest. And I'm not even going to read this to you, but brand image. And what's really key here is this word perception. Perception is reality when you're talking about brand. The way people think about your place, the stories they hear, past associations and experiences, all of that plays into a perception that that you will want to take control of as much as you can. So by planning how you want people to think about your town, what are those messages you want to communicate, and how do you want people to experience it, and what do you want them to feel? By thinking about that and planning for it, you can create a new perception and a new reality that will really help boost, from a marketing perspective and an economic development perspective, how people view your particular city. And the thing about perception is it happens to you whether you choose to address it or not. So the more you can think about it and address it and control it, the more you can convert it into what's real. So I have a couple of case studies here that I won't spend too much time on. I want to go through these fairly quickly. But the first one is Shaker Square. And Shaker Square is a really cool historic district. This is actually the second oldest planned shopping center in all of the country. And it was originally a traffic circle. It's about 5 miles from downtown Cleveland. And these two brothers here, the Van Sweringens, concepted this town center that would have the RTA Rapid running right through it, and that would connect into Tower City in downtown Cleveland. And so while this is a privately owned development, this is truly a neighborhood center. And so while the people who have grown up near this community have very, very deep emotional connections to it. And just to give you a quick sense of location, there it is on the map. It's a little bit difficult to get to. That's one of the challenges of the square. It doesn't have very easy highway access, nor does it have easy access into the metropolitan area. But it's such a unique location, has great characteristics, that there's a real draw here. And there's a little detail of it. So you can see one of its challenges, besides its somewhat remote location, is that it's a complicated square. This traffic circle was converted into a one-way traffic square with, you see Shaker Boulevard kind of bisecting it there, the Rapid running through the middle, a lot of points of merger. And so there's a lot of activity with trains and buses and vehicular traffic and pedestrian traffic and bike traffic. And in addition to being a really intense intersection for mobility, it's a really amazing intersection of people. This is located right between one of Cleveland's wealthier neighborhoods and one of Cleveland's more economically challenged neighborhoods. And what's really cool is that you have this neighborhood center where all of these people come together and sort of live together in harmony. So it's a pretty plain Georgian-style architecture. This is what it looked like about 2004. You see the Rapid running through there. And talking about taglines, what emerged as one of this Shaker Square's greatest strengths is that it's actually two places. It is this vibrant, exciting, energetic entertainment district at night. There's a movie theater, there's restaurants, there's a wine bar, and so it's this great nighttime venue. And in the daytime, it's a very practical business location with wonderful neighborhood downtown amenities, a grocery store, bank, pharmacy, and so forth. And so the concept for Shaker Square became this idea of night and day, which really speaks to the idea of it being this living intersection of different kinds of people and different kinds of modes of transportation and different kinds of activities. So there were a lot of explorations on what their logo concept might look like for Shaker Square. And what eventually emerged was this concept. And you can see the history of the traffic circle within the 4 quadrants of the square. And there's this idea of night and day with the 2 colors. And it translated very nicely into their website and marketing materials. And the website does a really nice job of allowing for some user-directed, allowed users to kind of self-direct to the sort of information they would like. So if they could say, "I want to eat," it would pull up all the dining opportunities. So I've mentioned before this idea of wayfinding. In many branding projects eventually end up as wayfinding projects. It's one of the biggest impacts that people can make in their downtowns is helping traffic flow, helping visitors understand when they've arrived, understand how to get to parking, understand how to get to the final destination. So developing sign programs is a natural extension after developing a branding project. And so you can see in Shaker Square that the signage was very small, hard to see, especially against the backdrop of the trees. And it was so ineffective that there was an idea to put a second sign above below the first sign to try to correct the problem, but that doesn't work either. So quick studies on some traffic flow, and you can see then that this is how the brand plays out in 3 dimensions at a much larger scale, but being able to create gateway signage to let people know that they've arrived in Shaker Square, very clear directional signage to get to them to the parking. And one of the things that is often found in communities is that there's a perception, again that word perception, that there's not enough parking, and more often than not there's plenty, but it's behind the buildings. So providing clear instructions to get people around to the back of the buildings where the majority of parking is can be critical to that experience people have. Instead of feeling lost, confused, and like they don't have a place to put their car, they can feel welcomed and engaged and confident about their journey. So, one last sign to share. I am a really big fan of director kiosks, and you can see the before and after shot here. But I really love encouraging people to experience a place on foot. So it's generally my objective to get their car parked and get them out of the car as quickly as possible, and safely, of course. But then provide them information about all of the things there are to do in your area, so that not only are they visiting the one destination they came for, but they can see what else you have to offer and maybe extend their stay or plan a second visit. And these are shots of what Shaker Square looks like now with this night and day theme and all of these amenities and weekend concert series, and lots of things to kind of reinforce the theme but bring the square to life and bring these communities together. And I mentioned at the beginning that Studio Graphique has actually made Shaker Square our home. We love the vision for this development so much that we actually moved in 5 years ago and now call it our home. So our second case study is downtown Lakewood, and many of you might know that downtown Lakewood is an Ohio Main Street community, and this is I wanted to share this because it's obviously a very different endeavor to develop a brand or a place that's quite public versus a place that's privately owned. That said, many people feel very strong ownership about their particular city. So we wanted to engage the community, and so a public meeting was held, and giving the public an opportunity to have their voices heard. So one tool you can use is the idea of these different boards that have different types of signage and graphics and logos. And we categorize them by traditional, historical, or something more contemporary, and allowed people to use red stickers for things they didn't like and green stickers for things that they did. And this was a way to give people a visual reference. A lot of people are visual, can speak better visually than they can verbally, and so this gives them a point of visual reference to make decisions about what they feel is representative of their particular community. And it emerged quite clearly that in downtown Lakewood, people felt that their community was more historical and traditional in nature. Online surveys are also a wonderful tool. SurveyMonkey is inexpensive, and it's a great way to reach a broader population. Not everyone will come to a public meeting, so this is a great way to reach more people and hear more voices. And we also recommend that surveys, there's maybe 2 surveys done, one for residents and general public and visitors, and one that's specifically targeted to the business owners because they have a different kind of vested interest in your downtown. And then capturing the results of these types of tools. What did that style board survey tell us? What did the community survey and the business owner survey tell us? And by the way, not be afraid to ask the hard questions. Of course, everybody chooses to live in their downtown because there's something that appeals to them and there's something that they're proud of. But what are those challenges that they feel they need to overcome? What are the perceptions that we want to try to change? So we ask some of the hard questions too, the negative questions. But with a branding program, you have the opportunity to really change those perceptions. So knowing what it is you're working for and against really can help in crafting a branding strategy that will be successful. Another thing I haven't mentioned yet, but is a really critical piece to a successful branding process, is developing a branding committee. So pulling together anywhere from maybe 5 to 10 members of the community who represent a nice swath of people who are very engaged in the community and can help drive and recommend decisions in the branding project. And one of the things that was interesting about the Downtown Lakewood project was they put color samples of these sign examples out on the street so that people could take a look at the color in the context of the actual city. And then they were invited to go online and fill out a survey with what color that they preferred. It's interesting that purple slightly emerged as a winner over red, and we associated that connection with the local high school, which is its team colors, its spirit colors are purple. But the branding committee was able to help make a recommendation that they felt red was a better choice to make a clear identity for downtown Lakewood separate from the high school. And here you can see some of the logo concepts that emerged, as well as the points of inspiration. What were the things that we saw in the architecture in the city that were really inspiring and representative of the style and feeling you got when you were there? And then suggesting varied color palettes that were historical or traditional in nature. Oh, sorry. One thing I'd like to point out that's interesting is more often than not, you'll have one single logo, but sometimes logo alternatives can be really helpful so that you can apply them to different mediums or different applications. And in the case of Lakewood, they were looking for something that they could take apart and piece back together in a variety of ways. And so there were a number of alternate logo configurations that were approved for use. And then again, you can see how that applies in the larger context of a wayfinding system. So while it's not a direct copy of any of the logos that you previously saw, it's very much on brand and representative of the visual palette they created. So my section on keeping it real, this is a lot more tip-oriented, but these are things that frequently come up as questions when working with communities that I like to sort of share the knowledge with you now so that you can kind of keep them in mind as you go through your own branding process. And the first is the name. Sometimes there's debate over what a particular downtown destination should be called. And our general philosophy is if you don't have a really, really good sized budget to communicate through marketing a new name, I would take the path of least resistance and call it what people call it. So we generally don't recommend changing the name of a downtown, and just use it how people generally refer to it. It's also, the name should be the destination. So not the Main Street program, not the CDC, but the actual destination. And then you can easily create sub-identities that go with that main destination identity so that each of the entities or organizations affiliated with the downtown can co-market from that. Involve your leaders. So make sure you have the right people at the table early. All your key stakeholders, especially in government, does the mayor or the town or city manager need to be involved? Key members from the mayor's staff. Is there a person responsible for economic development that should be at the table? Maybe representatives from the Visitor Bureau or Convention Bureau, Chamber of Commerce. Of course, the Business Improvement District, CDC, or Main Street leadership should be there. But possibly even consider your business leaders, especially if you have big institutions with big voices. You'll want to engage them early so that they don't become a little bit more troublesome later. And what's great is by engaging them early and making sure that they're heard, they will in turn become the advocates. So as the branding project moves forward, they'll be able to speak with confidence that this is the right thing for the community. And then involve the people. Public meeting early in the process to get them engaged, get them excited, and make sure that their voices are heard too. So ask them questions. What do they love about their community? Why did they choose to locate here? What are the challenges that they see? And what are they most proud of? And again, not everyone can come to the public meeting, so putting that online survey out there is a great idea. The more voices, the better, because we will want to convert them into advocates early. Another little tip that we found that can be helpful is identifying and inviting what we'll call the red ants. And these are the folks that sort of nip away at the project until they've poisoned it. And so making sure that they're invited to the conversation and they can voice their concerns might be helpful early in the process so that they don't poke up their head a little bit later on and try to be disruptive. I mentioned the branding committee. Again, 5 to 10 constituents is about the right size, depending on the size of your city. But what their role will be to lead the process in making decisions, or they'll make recommendations to the decision-making board. But they have proven themselves time and time again to be the most invaluable piece of the branding process and process. And then the unveil. This is when the logo goes live and the brand goes public. What's really going to make people connect is telling them precisely how their voice was heard. So providing a rationale that shows the translation between what they said, what they asked for, and what was actually created. So this section I've called Keeping It True, and this is the part where you'll want to make sure you maintain and protect your investment. A branding process can be expensive. At least it's a line item on your budget. So you'll want to protect your investment and uphold the integrity of your brand. So creating a brand standards. What are the rules for using your logo and your brand palette? But you're not a corporation, so you don't want to be overly stodgy. Where are the places where people can have a little bit of fun and be creative? And then I have to say it again because it's so important. Creating a brand standards will protect that investment. If you allow people to misuse it, it will quickly get diluted. It'll lose its power. It'll lose its effectiveness, and you've lost the investment. And I have included on a special page I've created for the webinar folks 2 white papers on the topic of brand standards. One is about it's about standards and guidelines specifically for brand identities, and the other is about standards and guidelines for signage. And then what you're seeing here is in your brand standards, communicating not only the do's, what are the rules for use of a logo, but also providing visual examples of the don'ts. Again, a lot of people learn visually better than they do verbally, so show them what not to do and put the big red line through it. And then, of course, this is a community brand, so by and large, the brand belongs to the community. If you have good guidelines in place, share it. Let people use it to help them market their businesses, market that they are a part of this particular downtown. And so look for co-marketing opportunities. Certainly share it with the chamber or the visitors bureau. And again, if you want to do a sub-identity that has their title next to the brand, that can easily be done. But by sharing it, then you create a sense of ownership by everyone who is using it. And I didn't want to pick on anybody with showing bad logos. So I've pulled out some really horrific examples of what not to do. And website logos and so handy. So I thank everyone for listening, and like I said, I did create a very special page for the Heritage Ohio group, and what's on this page are the 2 white papers I mentioned, and a couple of additional white papers or articles on issues that affect communities, and a couple web links that I thought might be useful to you. So if you get a chance to look at that, the URL is designwithdirection.com/heritageohio, and you can see that there's some information there for you. Devin's going to post this, so you'll have it, and I think he's recording this session as well. So if there's anything additional that you'd like information on, I'm happy to post it up here for everybody's use. But at this point, Devin's going to relay any questions you have, and we'll go from there. So thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending today, and thanks to Rachel for doing this today, and thanks to Studio Graphique, typing them in like this to help people save the places that matter, build community, and live better. If you've enjoyed today's webinar, please think about becoming a member of Heritage Ohio, and you can do this on our website. And if you'd like to visit and just learn some more information about community reinvestment, revitalization, or historic preservation, the website is www.heritageohio.org. Now, today's presentation is being recorded, and it will be available as soon as I get some time in the next couple hours to edit the video on it so it can be nice and concise for everyone. And I will be linking Rachel's presentation to that as well. That will be located under the webinar section of our website, and at the top of the website there's this drop-down menu under webinars, and you will go to archived webinars and materials, and that's where everything will be located in there. I will also be sending everyone an email a link to that, so if you're having any trouble finding it, just wait for the link to show up in your inbox in the next couple days, and you can follow it from there. Also, just a reminder to anyone that is requesting AICP credits today, if you've already requested your credits, I will be reviewing the attendance log for today, and if you attended today, you're already set, you'll be registered. If you did not register, or if you're not sure if you have registered already with us, when you registered for the webinar, just send me an email again. The email address to send to is dmiles, that's D-M-I-L-E-S, at heritageohio.org, and I will get you registered for that. And also, just thinking again about in the future, I'll be sending you a survey in the next couple hours, and if you have a chance, please fill that out to help us continue to improve our webinars. And particularly for the AICP members also. This is our first webinar that we are doing AICP credits for, so if you have any suggestions or any helpful tips for me, please include those in that survey as well. Okay, now we're going to turn it over to the questions, and if anyone has any questions, just type them in your question box and send them along. We have one question now. Rachel, what is the shelf life of a brand?
It used to be, and it still is, I think, by and large, for the retail environment and for consumer brands, it's very short, usually maybe 2 or 3 years. But with communities and downtowns and cities and places, I think that the lifespan could last upwards of 7, 8 years. Probably, what's wonderful about a brand is that while the logo may stay, the brand has a lot of opportunity for evolution. So if you need to change some of your messages over time or update the look and feel a little bit over time, all of that can and probably should be done, but the core of the brand can stay the same for a number of years and still be very successful. One of the things that can really help in that endeavor is knowing up front how you might like it to evolve. So if you have a sense of what major projects might be going on in the city, as you embark on a branding project, you can consider how that might change the city in the future and how the brand is going to have to adapt.
Okay, we have another question. Rachel, what is the ballpark figure to engage a professional firm to design a brand like Studio Graphique?
Generally, for the baseline brand, which would be a community engagement meeting, maybe a couple online surveys, and of course the expression of your identity in a logo mark, tagline, and color palette, you might be looking anywhere from $5,000 to, I'd say, $12,000. If you wanted to take it further and begin some conceptual expressions of how it might translate into a website or signage, it could, of course, go upwards from there. I find websites are probably the hardest thing to throw ballparks at because there's so many variables. It's like buying a house. Do you want a little tiny house or do you want a mansion? So websites probably have the largest amount of variability. But I still might put those in the 10, well, maybe 8,000 to, I've seen them as much as 30,000. So they have a pretty broad range of price points. But if you have a good sense of what you're looking for and what your priorities are, it's definitely easier to get an apples-to-apples comparison. One of the things that we're working on sharing with this audience in the near future is another white paper entitled How to Write an RFP, and it provides a good overview on what kind of things to consider and what to include in that RFPs to make sure you get pretty accurate and quotes that you can be confident about.
And going along the same lines as this question, do you have a ballpark pricing for the fabrication and installation of signs once the branding process is completed?
Okay, I lied. That's actually harder to quote than the website. Obviously, it depends on your sign count and the size of your community. We've worked on signage and wayfinding projects that were just maybe a few gateway signs and a couple of small identification or wayfinding signs. And maybe you could do that with a $20,000 to $30,000 budget. We've worked on $1 million sign program, so it depends greatly on the size of your community. Probably what's helpful is being able to talk with fabricators and wayfinding consultants early in the process, even before you write an RFP, to make sure that you can pull the funding in place. And there's some creative ways to get funding, especially if you can do grants and matching with some of the other entities or government entities or even major institutions in your city.
And the listener has a question for you to explain what an RFP is.
Sure. An RFP is, and I'm sorry for the lingo, it's a short for Request for Proposals. And so generally the purpose of an RFP is to itemize what it is you're looking for professional services on and what deliverables you expect out of that process, whether it's a logo or a website or a marketing brochure. So you'll identify the deliverables and send that request for proposal to firms that you feel are qualified and ask for a cost quote back.
And going on the lines of financing for the different types of branding, somebody has a question on if there are grants available to help communities, and another person has a question on have you ever seen examples of downtown merchants being a financial partner to develop the brand for a town?
There are oftentimes grants and other creative funding sources available, and I don't have a running list of them, and they change pretty frequently, and they'll vary depending on your location. I might venture to say Heritage Ohio could potentially point you in some directions. Am I getting a nod or a shake?
Oh yes, yes. We.
And your transportation grant program. What was the second question?
Asking if downtown merchants have, do you have any examples of them being financial partners to help with branding for a community?
I would actually recommend against that, and I'll tell you why. When people bring their dollars forward, they expect to have their voices heard on a different kind of level, and it can really influence the outcome of and success factors of your brand. And like I said, you might get a camel. On the signage and wayfinding program, we've seen some bad outcomes in a pay-to-play program where people could put money forth to get their name on signage. And the thing about signage is it's functional first. And it's not a marketing opportunity, but it's there to help people find their destination. So it has to be functional. There's a limitation to the number of messages you could put on signs. And there should be some kind of criteria and philosophy behind who gets on which signs and when. So asking for dollars, while it sounds like it might be helpful to the bottom line, sometimes it can create more problems than it's worth.
Moving on to a different topic area, somebody's asking about the creation of an arts or a cultural district. Is 4 or 5 blocks too small, and what would be a good size to make for one of those?
I don't think there's a size limit. I think it's relative to the size of your city, and it's relative to the intensity of the activities. If it really is an intense 5 blocks of arts district and you see a marketable opportunity there, it might be something to take advantage of. What I think is more challenging is communicating that new message. But if it's already on that path and it's something you can capitalize on and even encourage other adjacent retailers to get involved with it and truly make that transformation both in the visual appeal, the marketing message, and in the programming activities, there's absolutely no reason to consider otherwise. Of course, it's a great opportunity, and the more connections you can make across retailers and businesses, the stronger they can work to co-market each other.
The listener has a question on managing multiple logos. Her city government, the biggest corporation in town, and other nonprofit organizations all have established logos. Should a community logo relate to these, or should it be distinct?
This is a good question because it can really vary by city. My first inclination would be to be distinct, but there's some communities do co-marketing very, very well, especially with their big institutions. In fact, I have a video demonstrating the success of such a co-marketing campaign, which I can post on our website on the special link, www.designwithdirection.com/heritageohio. So I'll post that in the next 24 hours. But I think it's nice if it's distinct and it's clean and it's simple and it stands apart from the other institutions. But it would be even nicer still if it had a complementary element, so that they didn't, they look nice together.
Okay. Does anyone have any more questions? If not, thank you everyone for attending today, and once again, thank you to Rachel for having this presentation with us. Join us next month on the first Wednesday of April. The next webinar is going to be over designing a downtown plan and the introductory parts of that design.